Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We are reaching 4 years in the channel, and I thought to celebrate that we could do something that I haven't done in these 4 years, which is to do a video talking about my personal favorite manga of all time. Now, instead of just doing like a top 10 style video where I'd have to, really think about the rankings of these manga, I thought it could be more fun to just go all in and talk about all my 10 out of 10 manga and why I think they are 10 out of 10s, either because of their quality or because of their relationship with me and with my life. And these are not going to be really ranked. There's going to be 3 tiers though. The first tier is the honorable mentions. These are going to be my 9.5s. The bulk of the video is going to be about my overall 10 out of 10s, the favorite manga of all time, and then there's going to be at the end I'm going to be talking about like my top 3. So those last 3 are going to be the ones that are a step above all the others. So without further ado, let's actually talk about the honorable mentions. Now I've gotten 4 9.5s on my list. These 9.5s tend to be manga that I've ranked to 10, or I've been really close to ranking a 10, but either for some reason or another they kind of dropped down, but I didn't feel like they would be at the same level of all the other 9s, so they're 9.5s. They're honorable mentions, and we will start with a big one being Full Metal Alchemist. Now, Full Metal Alchemist was for the longest time one of the very few shonen manga that I've actually ranked at 10 out of 10. It was one of my first manga that I've read. I really loved it at a time, and I think it's among battle shonens, it's almost perfect. It feels different from all the others. It does things differently from all the others, and I think the one thing that really elevates it to me is that even after all these years, it has probably my favorite ending of all time. Pretty much anything to do with the father in the last, bulk of the manga was amazing. The final fight was amazing, and I just really loved every moment of it. Now, the reason why I dropped to a 9.51 is because I have not read Full Metal Alchemist since it ended, so I was following it weekly, or not weekly, monthly actually, for the later half of it, and then haven't gotten to it since then, and it's been so long now. That's been true even for a couple of manga in my 10s, but I think with Full Metal Alchemist there's just been a lot of it that I just don't remember, and I need to go back to it, and maybe after I go back to it, I'll ump it back to a 10. Another reason why I put it at 9.5 and out of 10 is because even though I really enjoyed it, there was a part there where I actually stopped reading it. If I remember correctly, was around, I think, the flashback of Scar, where I just kind of like felt a little bit bored, and then I stopped. I paused for a while before going back into the manga and catching up. A manga that is a 10 out of 10 should not make me want to stop reading it midway. So that's another reason why I thought like a 9.5 was a better ranking than a 10. But again, when I eventually go back to it and I re-experience it again, maybe it will be back to a 10. And that's true for, the others on the list. Next one I want to talk about is Gantz. So Gantz is a manga that I ranked at 10, mostly because I read it at a time where I wasn't really finishing any manga that I started. I think I've talked about in here a lot about my break of manga in around like 2014, 2015, and I read very, very few manga during that time between 2015 to 2018. A lot of those manga I read, I really didn't finish it. I started, I read a bit of it, I got tired, and I never touched it again. There's a lot of manga that are on hold or that I gotten back to later on that were manga that I dropped around that time. But Gantz was a manga that I didn't. I was a manga that I read it at a time where I wasn't really finishing stuff, and I read it and I finished it and I loved it. And it's a manga with 380 something chapters, 37 volumes long. It is big. It is massive. Although it is, to be fair, a very fast read. You can read a volume of Gantz very, very fast. So I think that is also part of it, and upon my reread I understood that. But I think at the time I was just so like I love this, and it's been a while since I felt like this while reading a manga. It's been a couple of years, so I gave it a 10. Looking back into it nowadays, and I've reread, although not the entire thing, I've reread a good chunk of the manga. I think the first 200 something chapters. It's not perfect. I still think it's really good. I still think it's very, very fun to read. And it has like some deep, some interesting moments. And I'm just, I love manga that are just like stupid and gory and over the top, and Guns is just that. So there's part of me that just really loved it for what it is, but I don't think it's a 10. There's part of me who are still like struggling, like maybe it's not even a 9.5, but because I really love it. I have lots of fun reading Guns, even on my reread. I think a 9.5 is a decent ranking. And then I got Eden, It's an Endless World. Now this is another manga that I've kind of pretty much forgotten everything that I have read it. It's a manga that at the time I really loved it, and I ranked it a 10. At the time I didn't have read many seinen manga. Maybe I think because I was more used to battle shonens, and this was something, and rom-coms I guess, and this is something that was very different from that. I think it just naturally just felt much better than everything else that I'd read. It just naturally felt like a 10 out of 10. Nowadays with a lot more manga, maybe not, but I think the thing mainly is that I just forgotten so much of it that it's kind of unfair to keep it as a 10. The last 9.5, but not the last honorable mention, is Solani. Now Solani is a manga that I've reread the most times, with the exception of another one that we'll be mentioning. If you know me, if you know the channel, probably can guess which manga it is, but I just really love Solani. Now the reason why Solani is not a 10 is because there's other manga by the same author that I think are better, that I ranked a 10 out of 10, and because Solani is not as good as those, it's a 9.5. But if you haven't read Solani, it's by Inu Asano, same mangaka as Goodnight Punpun, and it's not as dark as Goodnight Punpun, it's not as complex, it's not as heavy, it's a much shorter experience. But I think what Solani has over Punpun is that it feels more real. There's a lot of Solani that I can relate to. It's probably one of the manga that I can relate to the most, especially when I was reading it in my early 20s, where it just felt very true to that experience, to the experience of moving past, being a teenager and moving into being an adult and dealing with the amount of responsibilities, with work, with jobs, with university, with your place in the world. I think Solani does an amazing job at portraying that. And honestly, sometimes there's some days where I look at Solani and I think like that's a 10. That is a 10. But just because I think there's other better works from the mangaka, it's up there, but it's not there. As for the last two honorable mentions, this is probably gonna piss off a couple people when I mention them, but I need you to understand me. So the two of them are Berserk and Villain Saga. Now the reason for both of them being a 9.5, they're not even really a 9.5, I will call them a 10 on old, not really a pure genuine 10, is because I'm not following them since 2014. So it's been 10 years since the last time I've actually generally was caught up with both Villain Saga and Berserk. Not so much because when Miura passed away, I did read the chapters that I was missing, and so I did caught up with that, but it was a very disjointed experience because I hadn't read Berserk in a long while. The only thing I had read was I think half of the Golden Age, and so that experience was a bit disjointed because there was a lot of things that I'd forgotten. It just didn't felt as good as an experience as Berserk had felt, back when I was reading it, back when I first experienced it. Villain Saga I just haven't gotten back since 2014. Now the reason for that is, again, kind of the break that I had for manga. With Berserk, also the amount of hiatus also does not help. It's kind of hard to rank a manga 10 out of 10 and then say that I have not read the last 10 years of that manga's content. It just feels unfair, it just feels, I don't know, disingenuous. So I do not want to say these manga are 10s out of 10s. These manga are my favorites. I wouldn't consider them to be 9.5s. What I read from them, both of them were 10 out of 10s. Both of them were amazing. I loved both of them, but they're 10s on hold. And with that, all of the honorable mentions are out of the way, so let's actually talk about my 10s out of 10s. There's 13 10s on my list, and again, I'm just gonna drop them mostly without any order, but I do want to start with the two mangaka that are represented more than once in this list. And the first one, you probably figured it out, it's Inio Asano. I have Oyasumi Punpun, or Goodnight Punpun, as whatever you want to call it. And then I have Dead Demons Destruction. Punpun is just special to me in a way where I read it for the first time when I was at my lowest point, when I was at my most depressed point. And Oyasumi Punpun, Punpun just feeds off that negativity, that depression. It just feeds. You just kind of relate to the character. And so the first time I read Punpun, that just hit, and I think it helped me, honestly, reading a manga that is so dark and so depressing at that time. It kind of helped me have something to attach those emotions to and then get better, honestly. And because that Punpun is, it always will have like a special place in my heart. But then I reread the manga in 2019, a time where probably my, at my highest. I just moved into with my girlfriend. I had a better job than I had years ago. I was in a better place just in general, and I went into Punpun expecting it to be too edgy, too dark for me, but what I found out is that Punpun is not just that. There's so much more to the manga than just the darkness and just the depression. And I found myself appreciating and understanding and relating to a lot more of the sidecasts than just Punpun. Rather, in fact, I don't like Punpun, the character, upon a reread. He's a character that is just too locked into himself. There's a lot of times where he's given salvation, but he doesn't. And I think that does speak to a human part of us. There's a lot of people that say that Punpun is too dark, and I think there's, it's a fair critique, although that's what the mangaka, that's what Inio Asano was going for, was just building and writing kind of like the darkest manga that he could. But I think to just describe it as such is unfair to the manga. There's a lot more, there's a lot of other characters, a lot of other moments that are just kind of a little bit more lighthearted, that just, I don't know. It was just special on another level. Because of that, I always felt like it deserves the 10 that I gave it. However, saying that, my favorite manga from Inio Asano is Dead Demons, because I think Oyasumi Punpun is kind of like the culmination of Asano's evolution over the first 10 years of his career. Everything that he wrote in the early 2000s, in the mid 2000s, kind of feel like they culminate artistically in Goodnight Punpun. It is the best that Asano can be at that point in time. So moving into Dead Demons, he had to, he could just do the same thing like he does in Girl on the Shore, for example. But with Dead Demons, it feels like it's an evolution. He's moving forward, he's giving different things. He still has Inio Asano, and there's still Inio Asano stuff in there, but Dead Demons, it's so much more than what Punpun was, I think, in terms of the plot, in terms of story, in terms of the themes and topics. And just like Punpun spoke to me, when I first read it, I think Dead Demons speaks a lot to me, and honestly to a lot of people view of the world today, because Dead Demons is about the slow ending of the world. It's about all these catastrophic things happening around us, and it's about having to just move on and deal with these emotions, and not having enough energy, not having enough emotions to even be able to share to everything that is happening all over us. It's about mundanity in these events, and I think that's something that's happening in the world right now. I mean, I've done an entire video on why Dead Demons is amazing, and I do talk about Pun Pun in that video as well, but it is just a very current manga, and one that I think everyone should read. But my next mangaka is probably my favorite mangaka, and all of his works kind of feel the same in a way, where I think, or at least like all the work that I put on the 10 out of 10 are similar. I'll say that the good things that I like about them are all the same, and that is Naoki Urasawa. The three manga that I ranked 10 out of 10. The first one is Monster. Second one is 20th Century Boys, and the third one is not Pluto. It's actually Billy Bat. The first manga that I read from him was actually 20th Century Boys. At the time, I was not aware of who he was. I was not aware of Monster. I just found a manga really up high on the the scanning website that I was reading, because it was organized alphabetically, and 20th, the 2 puts it right up on the top of the list, and I just kind of like clicked on it, read it, and it was amazing. I think it was the first non-battle, non-rom-com manga that I read, kind of like probably the first seinen manga that I read. It's just very, very different than anything else that I'd read, and it still feels different. I still think Naoki Urasawa's manga are unique to Urasawa. Monster, I think, is most popular. Monster, I ranked it 10 out of 10 because I feel like it's the perfect manga. It's a manga where every panel, every character, every line feels like they matter, feels like they're important to the plot at end. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not, some slower moments, some dead moments here and here to just kind of like break the action. But what I mean is that every single thing fits. Every single thing has a purpose. It feels like the perfect manga, technically speaking. Feels like the perfect story, technically speaking. Now, there's still a lot of heart. There's still a lot of really amazing characters. And again, the plot it is amazing. A lot of people don't like the ending. I think it's great, especially compared to other Naoki Urasawa endings. I think it's pretty great. So I think it deserves a 10. Just based on all the other manga that I'm gonna be mentioning, it just kind of feels like the most objective, although I don't really like that word, but it feels like the most objective 10 that I can give. It's to Monster. That said, I think 20th Century Boys is better just on the sense of I like the characters more, I like the mystery more, the nostalgia of it all, like the fact of going back to those characters' childhoods and having like these 2 layers of plot developing. It was really great. I felt a deeper connection to it. Now, it also I read it first, so 20th Century Boys was a lot more novel than Monster was, but I think in terms of heart, it just feels like the more interesting story. Now, it has a lot more flaws. I think the ending is not that great. I think it can get confusing at times, and Monster feels like the better, more tight experience. I still prefer 20th Century Boys more. And then Billy Bat. I think Billy Bat is the most underrated of Naoki Urasawa's manga. It does everything else that the others do, but more. It does a lot more. Now, with that comes a lot more flaws. It is a lot more confusing. There's a lot of times where you just kind of like don't know where it's going. There's a lot of stuff that you're just kind of like, you didn't need to do this. But come on, I just love just how much it is. Like, Urasawa can just bring everything and kind of like try to pull it together and kind of doing it, honestly. Is it longer than it should? Maybe, but I was always curious as to what Urasawa was going to bring up next. There's the Twin Towers, there's World War II, there's the moon landing, there's thriller, video recording. There's just so much happening all the time in this world. like bringing up real events. I think the JFK's assassination is also part of it. There's also part in like feudal Japan. There's so much going on with Billy Bad, and it's easy for a lot of people to just kind of like dismiss it and just kind of ignore it because of that. But I think it's really fun how much it does, and because of that, I probably had a lot more fun with it than I had with the other two, and so I just thought it was worth a 10 out of 10 regardless. Moving into the next couple of just random 10 out of 10s. I think we can start with Chainsaw Man. Now, I'm not someone who really likes to rank ongoing manga, so I rank Chainsaw Man 10 out of 10 part 1. I still really enjoy part 2. I do want to see how it goes and how it ends before I give it a full ranking. I think part 1 deserves it, just based on just how much fun it was. I think it was probably my favorite experience. Being part of the Chainsaw Man community was special. Reading it weekly and discussing with people was pretty interesting, was pretty special. It was probably my favorite part. It still kind of is my favorite part. It's the only manga per One Piece that I actually genuinely follow every single week, and that's also because, you know, I'm friends with a lot of people in the community, and if I don't read it right away, I get spoiled, so it just, you know, I have to. But, you know, it was fun. There's always like stuff to talk about Chainsaw Man. I made a bunch of videos talking about it. It's just wild. It is fun. I love the character of Denji. I love the character of Power. I love the character of Makima. It is just wild and crazy and insane, and it's so much fun. You never know what's gonna happen next, and I don't really get that with other manga. It's a pure, genuine Chainsaw Man thing, and that makes it very, very special. A very, very special read, a very, very unique read to me, and those are the things where I want to give 10s out of 10. Is those experiences that after having read, you know, over 700 manga, I can point out and say, that is special, that is unique, that gave me something that all the other 699 manga did not give me, and Chainsaw Man does that almost every single week, or, you know, right now, whenever it does publish. It's not always every week, a lot of times it's bi-weekly actually, but it is special all the time. And I think part 1, again, it has a lot of flaws. I can forgive the flaws because most of the time, even those flaws make for interesting, make for fun, make for wild reads, and a lot of people are not going to agree with that. I don't care. I love Chainsaw Man. It is my second favorite Shonen Jump manga that I've ever read. And read, you know, over 100. I think I've read like 130 Shonen Jump manga, like just weekly Shonen Jump manga, and Chainsaw Man just kind of like ranks above all of them. But one that is kind of obvious, really. But I'm gonna keep it a mystery till I mention it. Another manga that I should mention, that I probably mentioned a lot in this channel, is Memories of Veminon. Now, I've just done a video where I recommended it to a bunch of content creators, and they all gave their opinion of it. I also made an entire video on why Memories of Veminon is that special, so I would just tell you, just go watch that. It's one of my favorite manga. Eminon is my favorite character of all time. She is the mascot of the channel. This is a manga that is very special to me. I read it years and years and years ago, and at the time it really felt like I was the only fan of the manga. Now nowadays I can find fans of Memories of Veminon. It's released physically. There's a lot more people reading manga, there's a lot more people finding it, but at the time it just felt like I was alone with it. And so I created a deep, unique connection with Memories of Veminon that still remains to this day. And it's the manga that I've reread the most, and whenever I reread it, it feels special still. 10 plus years after I read it, and 10 plus times that I've reread it, it still feels special, and that is very rare and very unique to Memories of Veminon, and so it deserves a 10 out of 10. I think some people may be surprised that it's not on the top 3, It's close to it. It really is close to it. I just think I like the character of Vamenon a bit more than like the story of Memories of Vamenon, and because of that, it's still a 10 out of 10. It's still among my favorite manga of all time. It just isn't, you know, top 3. On Animaster Kurosawa, it's probably weird one. It translates to Masturbation Master Kurosawa, and it's a doujinshi. Now, for people who don't know, doujinshi doesn't necessarily mean that it's hentai or anything of the sort. Doujinshi just means self-published, and this is what Onani Master Kurosawa is. It's not an hentai, it's a doujinshi. It's by a mangaka that would eventually do a Shonen Jump manga, the Ballroom one, and now they're doing, the artist of this manga is doing the Magic the Gathering Jump manga as well. So they're doing well for themselves, but they started here with Onani Master Kurosawa, and this is a manga that the first 3 chapters are, they feel they really like a Death Note parody, and then it evolves past that to probably my favorite redemption arc of all time. Now, there's a lot of people who don't like Onani Master Kurosawa, but I always find it interesting because I feel like the reason why people don't like it is because of the character and the redemption arc. A lot of people don't feel like the actions that the character has done are redemptful, or sometimes they don't feel like the character did enough. In talking about Onani Master Kurosawa, I generally tend to learn something about the person in ways that I normally don't when discussing other manga, because you can kind of understand just where they stand about forgiveness, about certain actions, about giving people a second chance, and when to give people a second chance. And I think that's very important. Now, personally, I do believe Kurosawa has done a beautiful redemption arc through the story, and because of that, I really love it, I think. And it's a manga that I reread a couple times. It's always cool, it's always interesting. Yeah, if you get past the first 3-4 chapters, then honestly, I still think they're pretty funny. I like those chapters, but they really don't show you what the manga becomes later on. I think it's worth checking out, especially if you're a fan of a little bit more of a darker stuff, like Pun Pun, for example. I think you will have a great time with Onani Master Kurosawa. Don't stop yourself from reading it because of the title. It does tackle a couple more sexual topics, but it's worth reading it. I think the only 2 I have not talked about, one of them is My Son Koku. Now, My Son Koku is a manga that I've read recently. It's my newest 10 out of 10. That's it. The manga is from, I think, 1979 or 1980. It's kind of the first pure shonen rom-com as we know them, although, I shouldn't say shonen because this manga is seinen, but it kind of is the first rom-com as we know them today. A lot of the things originated in My Son Koku, and I still think it's one of the best. I still think a lot of manga do the things that My Son Koku was doing without understanding why it was doing, or doing it a worse job at it. And it's amazing that, like 45 years after it was published, it still remains as one of the best ones of the genre it essentially birthed. My Son Koku also just kind of talks to me on a primal level. It feels and reads a lot like one of my favorite manga of all time, Lavina, but in a lot of ways it feels better. And not only does it feel better in some ways, but it came first. So I'm able to recognize that Lavina just copied a lot of ideas from My Son Koku, and because of that, because I feel like this is a version of a manga that already gave a 10 out of 10, but almost more perfect, I kind of have to give it a 10 out of 10 as well. The only thing that My Son Koku does not have that Lavina has is the deep connection that I have with that manga. But in terms of quality, My Son Koku may be the peak of one of my personal favorite genres in manga, so of course it needs to be a 10 out of 10. And the final one of this list, before we move on to the top 3, is Kasane. Now, Kasane is the way people talk about light in Death Note, where it's kind of like this villain that is, you understand them and it's resentful and it's kind of like the anti-hero. That's what I feel about Kasane. I think Kasane is probably the best written anti-hero character I've ever read. The story of her goes that this is a kind of like an acting manga where she wants to be a member. She wants to be an actress for theater, but she's really, really, really ugly. And so, even though she does have the talent, she is really, really good actress. Most people do not see that because they stop at her face, literally at her face, her aspect, at her looks. But Kasane finds a way to change her looks, which basically means that she can swap the faces with other person by kissing her just for a couple of hours. And when I say swap, I mean swap. Like, she kisses someone and then she gets her face and they get her face. And then the story kind of evolves for that because she uses that power to be able to become an actress. But because of the nature of her power, she has to sacrifice other people. She has to use other people. And the story, we get to explore these other people as well as Kasane and why she does this. And she does things that are really bad, really horrible. And we understand that, but a lot of times it's hard to fault her because we know that the world has not given her a chance. The world keeps pushing her back, keeps kicking her down, and she is doing what she can, what she needs to do to actually be someone, to actually be able to achieve not only her dreams, but some sort of happiness, some sort of life. And it's in that desperation that Kasane becomes a lot human despite of all the actions that she does. And that makes for this beautiful, intense, mesmerizing manga that it's definitely a 10 out of 10 and probably the most underrated manga in this list right now because I very, very rarely see people talking about Kasane. But the few people that I do, like the 3 or 4 people that I do actually see talking about Kasane, all fucking love it because it is just that great. And if you are someone who's read Act Age, read Oshinoko, who's reading Akane Banashi, and you want something that is similar, you want an acting manga at least that is as good, or in this case even better, then you should most definitely read Kasane. And so we reach the final 3, the top, I will not gonna say the best manga of the list, but my most important manga of the list. And the first one is Love Ina. Now, Love Ina is the first manga I've ever completed. It is more than any other manga the one that got me into manga because before Love Ina, I read other stuff. I read Fullmetal, I read One Piece, I read Naruto, I read Bleach, That Note, I think. I watched the anime, and I really enjoyed those. But Love Ina gave me something different, especially at the time when I was read it, which was the first time I read it during the first time that I was genuinely really in love, and I read it the first time I was genuinely really rejected. So I was kind of like this weird soft space as a teen to really enjoy for the first time a story of that kind, like Love Ina, a rom-com, a romance story, which is something that at that point before I really didn't care because it was not something that I was experienced with. And so Love Ina did came at like a perfect moment where I needed something, and I latched into Keitaro and Narusegawa, and his journey to gain her love and to be together. At a time again where I was just being rejected, and I was trying to deal with those emotions of what I do with all the love that I had. Love Ina did came. Love Ina was a place where I could just drop those emotions, and it had with Keitaro, I had someone that I could cheer for something that I didn't have myself, and in him succeeding, I could hope that I would as well. And so there was like this deeper connection with a manga that I think can only happen once, and it just by chance happened to be Love Ina. Since then, Love Ina has kind of been my go-to whenever I feel like kind of down I really love the relationship between Keitaro and Narusegawa throughout the entire manga, and so whenever I feel kind of down, I know I can go back to Lavina. I know I can go back to that couple, and just have fun with the manga, just enjoy it. And Lavina kind of was the door to me reading more rom-coms, which a lot of rom-coms can only be found in manga. So while with battle shonens, with things like Naruto and One Piece and Bleach and all of that, I was moving into manga, but still a lot of things that I wanted to watch, I could still watch them in anime, and I was still, moving past anime into manga. Lavina was what helped me, because a lot of the stories that I wanted to read, that I could read, that looked cool, a lot of them only existed in manga form, and so I had no other choice but to read them in that form. And it also was kind of like the gateway for me to experience and read manga that wasn't just mainstream popular stuff. Even though Lavino is pretty mainstream and was very mainstream at the time, it helped me get into other stuff that really wasn't, in ways that I don't think the battle shonens, the big three, did. So I owe a lot to Lavina in a lot of different ways. That said, I do think the manga itself is, pretty good. I always call it the Dragon Ball of rom-coms. It's not the first, and again, it is a manga that takes a lot from the first, from Maison Koku, but I think it establishes and creates a lot of what will be used in future ecchi arums, essentially. A lot of the 2000s ecchi arums that you read have a lot of Lavina in them. Even things like Nisekoi has a lot of Lavina. Even things like, I think, quintuplets have a lot of Lavina into them. This influence still is felt today, although I think because of that, when you go back to Lavina, it can kind of feel pretty primitive at times, where it just feels like you're watching things that you've seen a bunch of times before, but that's because all of those other manga copied or taken things from Lavina's success. For good or for bad, I think a lot of people probably hate the tropes that Lavina brought to the table, but I think they're really well executed in the manga. Does it have flaws? Yes, there's a particular arc with the stepsister that I really, really dislike, although it is followed up with the final and my personal favorite arc in the manga. But the thing that really puts it in this upper echelon is just that I have a connection with it that will never be replicated. I have a lot of moments over my 15 years since I read it for the first time. I was this little stupid teenage kid, and now I've grown so much since then, and Lavina has been there. Even though it is a short manga, it has been there, and it has helped, and it has been through my growth, and I go back to it a lot of times, and because that, there's the level of nostalgia that I have for Lavina is hardly matched by any other on this list, bar maybe one. Reading Lavina brings something. It makes me feel like I am that teenage kid all over again. It gives me memories of high school, those rooms, those classes, those people that I was with at the time, and it just is almost like a time travel machine. And it's not like it's not a 10 out of 10 in some way that some others in this list are, and it's not a manga that I'm gonna tell you to go and read and just it's gonna be amazing, gonna love it. But if you are looking for rom-com manga, I do think Lavina is still a valid choice to go for. But I think what's magical about Lavina, what's magical about some of these manga in here, for a manga to be your favorite, it does not need to be technically perfect. It does not need to be this amazing, deep, intricate story. It just needs to give you something that you need. It just needs to help you. And Lavina has helped me. For even, if you read the manga, you may not think like that's the kind of manga that can help and save people. It definitely has, though. It definitely helped me a lot. Now, One Piece is essentially kind of also one of my favorite manga, one of my favorite anime. The first time I heard the word anime was in a One Piece ad. At the time, I didn't really know what a One Piece was. When I moved into high school and a lot of my friends were watching Naruto, and I started watching Naruto, One Piece was another one that I was kind of like, I'm gonna watch this. It's a lot of, like, some of my classmates also watch One Piece, also like it. We were just getting into Marineford, and I caught up towards the tailgate of Marineford, and since then I've been following it weekly, and it is just special to have that manga to be always there. And I know it's not going to be always there, but for the past 15 years, it's been. In high school, I'm watching Luffy and going back and saving Ace, and I remember vividly the time skip, the month that we had on break, and everyone was theorizing what was gonna happen, how would they look like, and getting to see those reveals of those outfits, and seeing the Fisherman's Island. Was something special in ways that I don't think I've ever experienced in this community ever again. I remember being in college and reading Dressrosa, and still being in college and reading Big Mom, and I remember getting back into anime and manga. First of all, I remember, just stop having that break of anime and manga, but still reading One Piece, still going, still watching, still reading that manga every single week. Or if not every single week, catching up every couple, 2-3 weeks. I remember going back into manga, getting back the edition, and getting back into the communities, and seeing Wano being discussed and talking about it. And now with Egghead, One Piece has always been there throughout half of my life, and the half of my life I remember the best. During my most formative years, during the years that I became who I am, Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, Nami, Usopp, Chopper, all the others, they've always been there. I don't know. The fact that it is reaching its end is awesome and exciting, because we do want to know. Like, we have been waiting for years, for more than a decade. Some people for decades. For some of these moments they've been waiting for, to finally reach these points, to finally get to see them, to finally see all these things unfold and happen. It is special in ways that you can't explain and you can't understand unless you've been part of it. Sorry. This is not crying, this is emotion, this is just my throat hurts. But you haven't been able to experience unless you won't be able to understand unless you've been able to experience something like this narrative, this long form narrative that happens for this long. For things to happen that are paybacks to things that I've read for the first time when I was a wee lad in high school, and now seeing them as a 30-year-old dad is, I don't know, you can't describe it. You just have to experience, you just have to be part of that community. And I think for a lot of people, for a lot of fans that were fans since the mid 2000s, from the early 2000s, from the early 10s, that's something that's special about One Piece that cannot be replicated unless, you've been also following things like Baki or Detective Conan or Hajime no Hippo or some of those long-form stories. And finally being able to reach the end that we've been all waiting for, we've been all anticipating and theorizing and expecting, it is special. It is very, very scary, and I do not know what I'm going to do once we reach that point, once it ends. How are we gonna live without One Piece? A lot of people ask, like, what's Shonen Jump gonna be like? What's Shonen Jump gonna be like after One Piece ends? And I'm more worried about what's gonna be like for me when I don't have One Piece to follow. Because I'm always going to have other manga. I'm a manga fan. I'm not a fan of one series. But it's One Piece. I don't know how to live without it. I don't know how to just not have those chapters, you know, waiting. It's gonna be weird. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna be strange. Part of me is really scared. But the fact that it can affect me that way, that a story can have that impact on me, and not only me, but many people all over the world, makes this worth the 10 out of 10, makes this worth that number to me much more than the pure sales number of it, for how amazing it is, gives. I think it's the people that read it that makes this manga special. And the final manga is strangely not as special as the other two in that term, but overall it's the manga that I tend to call the best. The one that I tend to call the number one, Dorohedoro. Now the thing about Dorohedoro is that it is just the manga that I consider to be perfect in terms of what I want from a manga. I think it has a little bit of everything that I enjoyed, and it has done it perfectly in ways that I had the time of my life for reading Dorohedoro, and it's part of why I came back to manga. Now Dorohedoro is a bunch of genres that I like. It is funny, it has this, you know, rom-com, not real rom-com, it has like a slice of life vibe mixed with this gruesome, horror-infested, gory thriller story. And it's dark, and it's stupid, and it's fun, and it's depressing, and it's violent, and it's cute, and it is everything that it should not be at the same time, but it is, and it is done seamlessly. And I think the best thing about Dorohedoro is that it has, in my humble opinion, the best cast ever in any manga ever. They're so much fun. Not individually, although individually they're great, but it's not individually. I think the cast as a whole, the way they interact, the way they have fun together, the way they're all, you know, sides, and there's not a single villain, you know, there's not a bad guy per se, they're just like kind of like factions that just happen to interact and be stupid together. It's amazing. I think the plot, the mystery is really interesting, it's really in-depth, it leads you to theorize a bunch. I think the art style is amazing, it's mesmerizing, it's probably my favorite art style ever. It is just honestly kind of like the perfect story. Again, I do not have the same level of connection. I've read it like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I think. It has helped me come back to manga because Dorohedoro was kind of like the second manga actually that I read after that break that I did. So the first one was Kami-san, and Kami-san was great, and it helped me get back and, you know, enjoy a manga. And I think Kami-san was great because it wasn't plot heavy, it was very slice of life, it was very soft read. But then I read Dorohedoro, and I kind of read it all in 2 days, and the first thing that I wanted to do once I finished Dorohedoro was reading Dorohedoro again. That is not something that happens very often. Die Dark, which is by the same mangaka, Kiwai Yoshida, feels very much like the same thing. I can kind of see me giving it a 10 out of 10 when that one ends as well, because it just has everything that Dorohedoro does, but puts it in space. It's essentially Dorohedoro 2, and it is really fun. But for now, I think Dorohedoro is the better one, and I think it is, you know, much more special. But that is a list. That is being a really goddamn long video, and I assume like 2 or 3 people only reached this part. But if you watched it till here, thank you, and I'll see you next video.